and an important subject. But I'm sure most of you have already been at work or have and are ready to just kind of go home and rest your feet, and to come out and talk about something important that involves your community is a wonderful thing. My name is Max Roth, and I work with Fox 13 News. I'm a political reporter, and I anchor our weekend news. And I'm going to introduce these folks. For the most part, I'm just a traffic cop here today. I'm going to help facilitate the conversation. We're going to hear from some people who've spent a lot of time studying this issue of how counties govern themselves, how they do it here in Utah, and what the options are in Utah, and what the options are for Weber County, and the history of this in Weber County. And just to say a couple of things very quickly. First of all, one of the reasons I'm here is because this is home. Because I grew up in Weber County, I love Weber County. I think that it is the most beautiful place, and it's just, I'm just so thrilled to have the chance to still be able to come and be a part of things here. And in fact, one of the reasons we started a little bit late is because I kept on running into people I haven't seen in too long, and giving big hugs and really saying hello to important people to me. So I'm thrilled to be here, and thank you all for coming. I hope this is a good conversation. After all of our experts have spoken, then this will turn into a discussion. And you'll be able to, you can see that there's a mic over here, there's a microphone over here, and if you have anything to say, you'll have the opportunity to say it. We'll talk a little bit about that after our experts talk. Now, who's on the panel? We have Di Allison on the far end here, and she's going to start us off. And Di's going to be talking about how Weber County has considered these options historically, what options have been on the table, and where we are now. And then we have Leah Murray, who is a professor of politics here at Weber State. And Leah's been looking into how the different counties in Utah that work with a council system work, because even if you choose a council system over a commission system, that doesn't mean that it's a one-size-fits-all. There are lots of sizes, and so we'll learn about that. Adam Troop. Adam is here from the Utah Association of Counties, and so as you have questions about what's happening on the ground in counties, Adam's the one who's familiar with how this is working in different places, both the commission system and the council system, and so he'll be a fantastic resource for that. And then here at the end, and speaking last, is going to be Duncan Murray. And Duncan is a lawyer. He's been in private practice in Weber County for 22 years. Duncan is also the city manager of South Weber. But Duncan knows how the process works. And so he's going to talk about, okay, if Weber wanted to change how it governs itself, this is how Weber County would do that. And so let's get started. And Di, you get to go first.
Carol, did you want to say something?
Oh, you know what? I forgot something very important. And actually, the other thing that I wanted to say is that I'm very happy to be with the group. The League of Women Voters is sponsoring this with the Olene Walker Institute. Carol McNamara with the Olene Walker Institute, it's nice to have you here, and tell us a little bit about the Institute.
Thank you. I am Carol McNamara. I'm the director of the Olene Walker Institute of Politics and Public Service here at Weber State University, and we're happy to be partnering with the League of Women Voters to sponsor this panel discussion about the options for county government and what form of county government Weber County should have, whether it should be studied, whether we should stay with what we have. I wanted just to take a moment to welcome you here, but also to tell you about the Walker Institute. The Walker Institute was founded by Governor Walker 2 years ago with the administration at Weber State University, and we are the home of the internship program, the Politics, Government, Public Service Internship Program, but we also have many events that are coming up this fall that I just wanted to mention, hoping that some of you, maybe all of you, will come to these events. We have a Constitution Day event on September 18. I know Constitution Day is September 17, but we're doing it on the 18th. on debating same-sex marriage and the Constitution. On September 23rd, we'll be hosting the first Congressional District debate, which is the first debate of the Utah Debate Commission Consortium here at Weber State University. And if any of you are interested in acquiring tickets for that event, please email me or get in touch with me, grab me after the event. And finally, we have our signature event, the Haven J. Barlow event, where we're going to talk about the Count My Vote compromise and the future of choosing candidates in Utah in the future. Please give us your information so we can invite you to our future events and take some of our swag outside in the hall. I was also asked to tell you that the voters guide, the League of Women's Voters Guide, is online on their site at lwrut.org. Thank you for coming, and please come back to our other events.
Carol, thank you so much, and thank you for being patient with me. We at Fox 13 have learned what a fantastic resource the Olene Walker Institute is, and lucky to have it here in the state. So now, Guy, if you would start us off talking about this process.
Okay, good evening. I want to share just a little bit of history about county government in Utah, specifically Weber County. Prior to 1972, the Utah Constitution required that the legislature establish a uniform or the same kind of government for all counties. In the 1960s, maybe the late 50s, our counties really started changing. Our 29 counties started changing. They became more diverse. Greater populations in some than in others, more wealth in some than in others, rural versus non-rural. And that was kind of what provided the momentum to change the Constitution and let it go to a vote in 1972, so that the legislature would then be able to provide optional forms of county government to better meet the needs of the demographic differences of our counties. It came to a vote, it passed, and that was in 1972, and then since that time, we've had our optional forms available within the state of Utah. In 1980, I went through my files. The Ogden Chamber of Commerce had Dan Jones and Associates conduct a survey of Weber County, and it was expressly to determine the level of job performance and overall approval rating of Weber County commissioners and the feasibility of a change in structure of Weber County government, and that was in 1980. In 1981, the League of Women Voters of Weber County completed a study entitled Weber County Government Today, Options for Tomorrow. After our membership did the study, we reached consensus, and the consensus stated in part that we supported a change in the form of Weber County government to include the principle of representation by district based on one person, one vote, with at-large seats to constitute a workable number of council members, and the concept of separation of legislative and administrative powers. That was in 1981. In 1994, the Standard Examiner came out, its editorial board, with an article that said, why not study reform of county government? I'm going to read the last two paragraphs of that. The commission form of government is a dysfunctional system. Depending on the differing levels of strengths of those elected, power can be abused. It is an archaic form of government, a heavy burden on taxpayers, and should be overhauled. It's time to reevaluate the commission form of government by a group of business leaders, legislators, and lay citizens. The county commission system of government is in ill repair. It needs more than a minor overhaul. The groundwork should be laid immediately for government reform in Weber County. That was in 94. In 1998, there was a vote in the county to go to a council style or form, and it was narrowly defeated. Now, in 2014, the League of Women Voters is once again in the process of updating its 33-year-old study. And our members will form a consensus again sometime this fall, probably in November. But I want to read the last two paragraphs of the first study that I was the chair of. No one form or plan of organization will automatically guarantee good government for any particular city or county. Examples of good and bad government under each of the various plans may be cited. The particular form is simply a tool in the hands of citizens and public officials. They should assess their needs and then decide which tool will best fit these needs at that given point in time. When citizens are apathetic and fail in their responsibilities to the democratic process, then a breeding ground is laid for poor government, regardless of the form. Well, because you're all here tonight, you're obviously not those apathetic citizens. And I want to thank you for being here and encourage you to ask questions, get more information, raise concerns after our next three speakers have a chance to present. Thank you.
Okay, now, Dialysis. And now we'll hear from Dr. Leah Murray at the Weber State University.
Thank you. So I'm sorry if you saw me looking out in the hallway. My son is just being picked up by my husband, so the smiles are, thank you for doing that and take him home. Okay, so if you're wondering, why is she smiling so strangely at these people over here? I just wanted to talk about county commission government in the state of Utah. I think sometimes we, and I talk about this with my students, assume Moses showed up with, here's the Constitution, wah, take it, or here's county commission government, wah, you can have that. And it's just not like that. Any kind of government in a democratic or Republican society is a contract between citizens and the people who are governing them as to what is the best kind of government that you should have. I think sometimes we get into path dependence, so what it always has been seems like what it always should be, and that's not necessarily the best thing. So I think it's important to take a look at our government, think about how we want to be governed and the choices that we make inside of our county. And I like that Utah allows us to do that and not has the state saying, this is what counties should look like. I wanted to let you know that there are 7 counties in the state of Utah that have abandoned the 3-commissioner format. So remember, the 3-commissioner format that Weber County has is what we were mandated before I was born to do, and then they changed it and said that we're allowed to change if we want to. 6 of these counties that have different governments are smaller than Weber County. So one of the, and all of the counties have moved in the direction of having more than 3. Okay, so we're talking about counties like Cache County, Salt Lake, Grand, Morgan, Wasatch, Summit, and Washington have moved away from 3 and gotten more. And when I say that 6 of these counties are smaller than Weber is because sometimes we talk about the size of a population. The fewer people there are who are representatives, sometimes it seems like representation might not be good. Does that make sense? So we're thinking about if we have hundreds of thousands of people, perhaps we should have more than 3. And 6 of our counties who have fewer people than we do decided that more than 3 would work for them. 4 of these have elected separate executives. One of the principles that this country is founded on is separation of powers. So when we're thinking about what our government should look like, one thing we might care about is that we have a legislature that is distinct from an executive. And in our county right now, we don't. Our commissioners are both legislators and executives. So 4 of them did elected executives, and 2 hired an executive. So of our counties that have made changes, 6 of them have separate executives, and are thinking about kind of separating those powers to a certain extent. When I looked across the country, so Weber County has 231,000 people in it, And I looked to see, you can go into the Census Bureau and kind of look at top population types to see what the counties were. Because I was trying to look and see, is there, if you have this many, you should have this many commissioners. And as it turns out, it's all over the map. So it's not to say there's some magic formula that once you hit 200,000, you should have X number of representatives. But I think it's a good thing for us to think about what we think our contract in this county should be, and what we expect from our governing body, and how many of them we think we should have, and if we think we could get better representation with more than the 3 that we have, or maybe we're good with 3, but I don't think it's a bad thing to be talking about it. Thank you.
And Leah, I love crunching those numbers too. So while you were talking about those counties, I grabbed my phone to look up the population of Washington County.
Right.
Because it seems like that's maybe the most corresponding. It's 144,000 about, and Weber County's 232 or 231.
Right.
You mentioned, so still Weber County is substantially bigger. So it's interesting to talk about the size of counties, Adam Troop, with the Utah Association of Counties. And I think another thing that comes up is how these councils are made up. If they're at-large seats, when we talk about how many councilors per citizen per capita, if we're talking about at-large elected officials or representing different areas of the county. But anyway, you're the expert. Adam Troop with the Utah Association of Counties. They do not have the council form of government right now. They have commissioners.
Thank you. I'm not certain I'm the expert, but I do have a good deal of experience dealing with the different forms. And let me just run through this quickly so you can see. I think the concept was discussed briefly already, but there are a couple of, there's actually only really 2 options. One of them is commission, the other is council with some executive branch. So first of those is a 3-member commission. That's the traditional form that we were allowed to go away from a number of years ago. The other option is actually an expanded commission. And so in that body, whether it's 5 or 7 members, the commissioners have both legislative and executive authority within their position. They are elected based on either an at-large seat, or they're based on voted as based on the district they're in. But the concept really is that they have legislative and executive authority both. The other option is a council. And in the council form, individuals have just legislative responsibility. And that means that they have to delegate the authority for the executive branch functions to someone else. In one instance, that may be a county executive who is generally elected. It's an executive or a mayor. The other option is a non-elected individual who is a council manager. So manager for the county reports typically to the council, and the council has legislative responsibility only. In that instance, the executive authority is delegated to someone who is not elected but is appointed and serves at the will of the legislative body, essentially. So those are the options, but you can see they break down into either joint responsibility for legislative and executive functions, or separated legislative functions and executive based on the role of the council, and then delegating authority to someone else. So I have worked and continue to work with both forms, and what we find is in some instances councils are easier to work with and some commissions are. But I think the big question that we face as we go through this process, there are a number of questions. Part of them is the issue of representation and how people are being represented. But the other question is how the work function is done. How the work function, the executive branch, what the county is supposed to do, the business functions, how that gets done is another big issue. And I think as you look to any form, the concern is, are you dealing with a form that allows for the executive function to be handled in an effective and in an efficient way? And what I think we found in my experience with regard to the council form is you end up having a legislative body that makes decisions on legislative issues, funding, spending, ordinances, etc. But you delegate authority to a much smaller body of number of people, and typically in a council form, you're delegating that authority to one person. And that is a real difference. There is no sense of that being spread around among people. Granted, that individual is serving at the pleasure either of the electorate if they're elected, or at the pleasure of the council, depending on the form. But you're not dispersing that executive authority, you're in fact contracting it. So there are balances on both sides, there are issues on both sides, and so I'm glad to take questions and answer those with regard to my experience, but I'd give that background on the various forms.
Some really practical considerations there about what works best in terms of efficiency. And then the other big question is what's represented best, is what you're saying. And also the idea of separation of powers, and if that's important, and how that works with the commission compared with the council. So we'll get into some of those issues, and you can ask questions about those in a bit. Also, I know we have at least one commission member here, so hopefully he is willing to pipe up and tell us a little bit about how the commission works as our discussion goes on. But Duncan, do we have two? Okay, wonderful. Three. Okay, so we have all of them. All right. Okay, so one of you is going to pipe up. So Duncan Murray, you are going to tell us how this process would work if Weber County were to change.
Yeah, we've talked about the what and the who, and I'm going to talk a lot about the how. First of all, though, I want to just briefly talk about the why. Why consider a change in form of government? And really, I think when we live in a constitutional republic, as we do, and we have different levels of government, and we believe in self-government, that we govern ourselves. And I think it's a very healthy thing, and Jefferson and the other founding fathers said the local government is the one closest to the people, the one that's most accountable. And but also, we should every 30, 40 years, Jefferson and other founding fathers said, take another look at our whole system, make sure it's working for us. And so it is a healthy thing to do, to study, and it doesn't necessarily mean you have to make a change, but you look and see if the current form of government is meeting your needs. I think a lot of the why is important too, because if the why of why we're considering it is to do what's best for the people, then that's a good motive. Sometimes we have to be careful that we're not being reactionary and focused on one narrow issue, as opposed to looking at the best interest in the general sense of all of the residents. But again, the how. If we're interested in that process, and if we think the time is right to see where we're at and see if we're governing ourselves in the way that we deem best, or I should say, how is that process? How does that take place? The Utah legislature has actually made some changes over the last number of years. In 1998, as a private attorney, I actually represented a group of petitioners who had enough signatures to place on the ballot a change in form of government. It only received about 48% of the votes, so it didn't pass, but it looked like it had a fair amount of support. And since that time, and I think the state legislature did a good job, they actually broke the process down. And you'll see now there's actually two main phases instead of one phase as far as ballot processes. And I think that's healthy, because these types of processes, they're very important. It's one of our most fundamental rights, the right to create or reconstitute our own government. And we need to be very careful and make sure it's very well thought out. And we need to take the time to do it. And I think our state legislature was very wise in creating a good process that doesn't allow any one group to dominate the process. It's very transparent, allows a lot of people to weigh in on it. So we have these complicated slides with dozens of words, that many of which you probably can't even read if you wanted to, but I'm going to simplify it for you, but it's still good material. Really, like I said, there's two phases, each culminating in a ballot, and then a third implementation phase, if you will. But what first happens is what we see up there, a study initiative. If there's a desire to study a change of form of government, there's two processes, two ways that can be initiated. One is by the county commission itself. They could vote and cause that process to start. A second way is a petition or an initiative could be circulated. And as it indicates there that as long as there's 10% of those who voted in the last presidential election that signed the petition, that would initiate the process. So if there were, for instance, 100,000 in the electorate, voters in the last election, and if 10,000 people signed the petition or initiative, then it would move forward. And it would, of course, be filed with the county clerk's office. The county clerk is tasked with the responsibility of validating and verifying that those indeed are the requisite number of signatures. If it's validated as being correct, it moves forward. If it's insufficient, there is an opportunity to obtain the additional signatures within a limited period of time. I think it's 20 days or so. Assuming then that the county clerk validates it, the last part of this first phase is that it appears on the ballot. And the neat thing, I think, in the way the legislature has changed the statute, the law since '98, is now there's very specific ballot language. I actually had to go all the way to the state Supreme Court back in '98 because there was no clear ballot title language, and was actually able to prevail and have some fair ballot title language placed on the ballot. So you don't have to do that anymore. You can just, it's just right there in state law. The exact verbiage or language is right there. It's very clear, and people can vote it up or down. But basically the question that's proposed and placed for the public is, should there be a study committee formed? Do we really want to study it? Yes or no? It fails or passes. If it passes, then you move on to what I call phase 2, which starts with an appointment council, which basically is just a group of people that picks the selection committee. I like to think of it as kind of a little mini constitutional convention, if you would, not for creating a federal government, but just for looking at our county government, which is kind of small. And as you know, in the constitutional convention, each state picked their own delegates. Well, here you have in a sense, delegate picking group, if you will. So this appointment council is made up of one person appointed by the petitioners, another person appointed by the county commission, another person appointed by all of the state representatives and state senators within the council, within the county. And then those 3 pick another 2. So you got a 5-member appointing council, and they appoint 7 to 11 members of a study committee, kind of a little mini constitutional convention, if you will. And then those folks, are tasked with, and they have a year to do it, studying all the options. Do we like what we currently have? Do we want to change to something else? And really they come up with 2 sets of results after transparently going out to the public, looking, listening, being watched, going back and forth. But they end up with 2 sets of recommendations to the public. One is which form of government, which could be staying the same, or it could be one of the other forms discussed. And then secondly, they come up with a timeline of how that would happen. And then of course, that is, there's where the study's conducted. And like I say, eventually it ends up appearing on the ballot. And so all those findings are made available to the public. And again, there's very specific ballot title language that was not previously there. So it's very clear to the public by that point, if they've listened and paid attention, what they're voting on. And that really, I think, is the most important thing, is that we're going to go through a lot of the basic ideas and concepts, but really these are such important questions that they shouldn't, like I say, be taken lightly, and they ought to be studied in depth, and they shouldn't be done quickly. And really, that is one of our greatest and most important responsibilities as citizens in our country, is to be well informed, and to, as part of the responsibility and duty of our self-governing process, is for us to really take responsibility And so this is a very important vote, and hopefully everybody's well informed by that point. And again, this ends phase 2, and they vote up or down. Do we really want this form of government with the timeline proposed, and so forth. So then, of course, if it fails, it fails. You go on as normal, no change in government. If it does pass, you move on to what I call phase 3, which is where the changes begin. And according to the timeline that was in the plan that was accepted, then you move forward on that basis. And what I mean by a timeline is there's obviously a transition has to happen from the older form of government to the new form of government, and it has to be an orderly process so that the business of the people is done in an orderly way. But that's pretty much the process, and like the other panelists, I'm ready, willing, and able to answer any questions within my realm of experience or expertise.
All right, Duncan Murray. Duncan, I have a couple of clarifying questions. I wonder if, when you talk about the ballot measures, special election, or is it in the general election?
These are generally in the general elections in November.
Okay. And so there would be 2 votes, one to go forward with the process, and then one to actually approve a new form of government. That's how it to happen. Okay. And I would like to make something of an executive decision, which is, since we have 3 commission members in the audience, amongst yourselves, do you want to nominate one to come up front and be a part of the conversation? I think it only makes sense to have, if we have people who are really a part of things. I see Matt is pointing at someone in particular, and I usually, when I see someone pointing to someone else, I usually choose that person to do it. What's that? And we have a commission chair. Okay, who's the commission chair? Commissioner Gibson, you're here. Over here. Commissioner, would you like to come up and be a part of the conversation? Thank you. It's good to have the people, if we're discussing, basically we're talking about your job, so you might as well have a chance to be a part of the conversation. So I wish I'd given you some warning, but yeah.
Put the person up here that pointed.
Oh yeah, you know what? I was going to do that to Matt, but then she was convincing about the whole chair thing. Okay, so I'm going to give you my microphone, and I'm going to take one of these from the audience. So Mr. Commissioner, let me hand this to you. And would you like to say anything from what you've heard?
I don't actually. I came to learn and to hear what was presented, and was not prepared to speak, but I'm glad to answer questions if you have.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, so we have these 2 microphones here, and we'd love to hear some discussion. Let me say, just at the outset, I mentioned that I'm going to be something of a traffic cop today, and this is where that role comes in that we want to hear what you have to say. Even if it's a pointed opinion, we want to hear it, but we want to make sure that it doesn't get personal. We want to make sure that it doesn't get so specific about one particular person's issue that it doesn't pertain to the whole issue. And we want to make sure that nobody filibusters. So we don't want, if someone starts to go on and on, I may prod a little bit to get to the point of the question. One other thing too is that if you'd like to speak from where you are, I'm glad to bring the microphone to you if you don't want to come up front. Do you want to act in that role over there as well? Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. McNamara. So is there anyone who would like to make a comment or have a question for someone on our panel?
Yes, I'm Jim Johnston, and I've been around Ogden since the early 70s and been very active in government and the Chamber of Commerce and in various capacities. Is what my concerns are that with only 3 people, there can be a time when one person is actually making the decision, where one commissioner has one standing, the other commissioner has another standing, and the vote to do whatever we do is down to just one person. I would be in favor of expanding the commission to whatever size this study would provide.
you want to see consensus be more of a process and not just one person having all the sway.
The possibility of only having one person do it, yes.
Okay, thank you so much, Jim. And by the way, thank you for introducing yourself and saying where you're from. That'd be helpful too as you do this. That's that comment. Again, we do have a commissioner with us. Does that happen where you have 3 people? So clearly, if one's on one side, the other's on the other, then one has all the power, right?
I don't know that I'd phrase it that way. I will say this. I served in a body with 75 members with Representative Sherpa a few years ago. And there was more than one time when I walked into the room to a tie vote of a body of 75 and had to cast a tie-breaking vote. So I think you can say that about any size of a body. You can say that in a body of 75 or a body of 5 or a body of 3. Very often you do have people break onto sides of a particular issue, and you'll probably have someone have to cast a tie-breaking vote. I think that's a possibility regardless of what the size of the body is.
Adam, I just want to add, I've found that with councils around the state on numerous instances. There are factions that form on different issues, whether it's on party lines or on both sides of an issue. And so it is really impossible to say that there will never be a time when one vote or one individual could swing the vote one way or the other. Maybe part of the question that comes from that broader side, a bigger size group is there more point of view? Are there more points of view heard? Is there more dialogue? And that's a reasonable question. But I'd also say I've heard the commissions and councils both argue many sides of issues for a long time and hear many points of view. At the end of the process, it really comes down to folks have a chance to vote, whatever size of the body, there's going to be a winner and loser side. So that's the reality of the democratic process.
And Leah, I saw a head nod there. Is there something you wanted to say?
No, I was just agreeing.
Okay.
I had something I was going to add there. We have to keep in mind too, I mean, we're talking legislative power and executive or administrative power on the other hand. And a lot of times we're focused on that legislative number. I mean, we saw some of the forms of government where instead of 3, you have 5 or 7. And certainly 5 or 7 is more than 3 and gives you more of a chance for a healthy debate. But keep in mind too, on the other hand, when you shift to a 5 or 7 member council and then you have a 1-person executive, you went from 3 wielding executive power to now 1, either an appointed manager or an elected executive, and 1 is less than 3. And so at any rate, there's something to keep in mind that a lot of times counties might be focused more on a higher percentage of executive or administrative actions than on legislative actions.
You said no. Can you make your points succinctly?
We would always have a commission chair who would be the chairman as opposed to an executive. Because the thing is here in your description, all of them have executive power, and so that the larger group would still elect the commission chairman.
And I think we're saying the same thing different ways. That I'm talking about, there were 2 options involving a council and a 1-person executive or manager. Then there's another 2 forms that are an expanded commission. In that instance, you are better both ways. You would have 5 or 7 wielding legislative power instead of 3. And then you would also have 5 or 7 wielding administrative or executive power instead of just 3. And so that also is a bigger number. So like I say, there's pros and cons to each form, but if you're trying to get a higher number of people in both legislative and administrative, then you're looking at an expanded commission, it sounds like, as opposed to a council executive or a council manager.
Okay, I saw some over here, sir.
Charlie Fennelman, Ogden. Does the legislature or constitution or whatever say whether this is a partisan or nonpartisan board or body under this new, like I say, it's expanded. I mean, does it have to be partisan or can it be nonpartisan like Ogden City?
No, it has to be partisan.
It has to be partisan.
no
The
matter.
state constitution says
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, well.
Or state law.
State law.
State law
State
says
law.
that. The legislature made that law. Okay, over here. Yes, sir.
Hello? Alan Willard, I live up in Eden. Two questions. The first one is, the argument I've heard against it is the cost associated with it. Do the other forms of government use full-time council members, or are they generally part-time? The second part of my question, let me just ask it now, is if the county commissioners were to put this to a vote tomorrow and to study it, from what I understand, then that study still, that doesn't cost us anything. That study is all by free people donating their time. Then it has to go through another vote before it gets put into law. So we study it and then it gets voted in. Is that correct? So 2 parts.
Well, my perception is everything costs something. So it's possible someone would do a study for you that didn't cost anything, but I'm not certain that would be. You'd have to come to an agreement on that with someone. But typically, you are paying someone to do those kinds of studies. But even beyond that, if the study were done for free, there is still a good deal of cost associated with evaluating the process, getting public information out, and then eventually actually putting it to a vote, which obviously any election does cost money. So no, the process is not free, and it can cost a substantial amount of money depending on how detailed it is. So I wanted to answer that. I'll be glad to let you speak to it.
Di, I see you moving towards that microphone.
Point of clarification.
I'm not sure your mic is on.
No, I'm so loud, I'm an ex-teacher. Point of clarification. The people who are on the study committee are not paid. You got it, okay. So you're just talking about then paper costs, the commission has to give them places to meet, that kind of stuff.
Right. There is no formal requirement to pay a study, but yes, you're going to have costs incurred as a result of what you're doing.
I just wanted to make it clear that it's not the people that were appointed to do the study that are paid.
And another thing I understand is that your question is well made as well, because there are 2 ways that you can get to a study. And that's part of what you're saying, right? That one way is to go through the petition process, and another is if the commission were to say so, they could simply say, let's have a study, and you wouldn't have to have that first ballot.
Right.
Yeah, isn't that the case? Okay.
Yes. So there's a lot of different pieces that go into the answer to your first question. I think I'd summarize it this way.
What was the first part for those of us who don't remember?
The
salaries. Is everybody paid?
Well,
Yeah.
and it's actually broader than that.
Right. I thought your question was, if you go from 3 to 5, wouldn't you have more salary? So the cost of actually having expanded commission or council.
They go to part-time.
Correct. So like Salt Lake has 9. Could you explain that cost differential?
Not in detailed numbers, but I can say this: if you go from 3 commissioners to 5, yes, there's more cost, no question. But
Even though they're part-time versus full-time?
well, there is more cost involved in addressing the needs to deal with the needs of running the county. Now, can I give you that number? Definitely no. But what I would say is, Grand County has an expanded council or expanded commission. How does their cost compare to a county of the exact same size with similar staffing? I really don't know. I'm sorry, I can't tell you that. But the issue is, what is the design that you're coming up with? So the easiest comparison really is to a council. And if you look to counties that have councils and either an elected or an appointed manager, typically those counties have part-time council members because their role is only legislative. So the question then has to be left to the issue of, well, what are you doing to get the executive function handled when you have no commissioners there to oversee the departments? Do you need more staff, or do you go with fewer staff and therefore you don't expand? That the entire process can be much cheaper if you simply don't hire staff, you don't hire a county manager and pay them very much, and you have part-time counsel. Absolutely, it's very inexpensive. But the question has to be, are we getting the work done on the executive side in a way that is actually what the public wants and is meeting the public need? That I would suggest that county governments around the state are underfunded for that purpose everywhere. So is it cheaper to have a council? Depends on what you want. Is it more expensive to have a council? Depends on how you administer it. So I would say this, in Salt Lake County, they have a council. Every council member is part-time. But every council member has a staff person who runs their office. They then have department heads who run the different departments, and they have a county mayor. So is that a less expensive or more expensive than the commission would be? If I had been around, I probably could give you the actual numbers and somebody could tell you, but it's not as simple as saying, oh, well, we've got part-time people, so now we have cheaper salaries even though we expand to a council.
Okay, let's go to another question from the audience. I'm going to go right back here.
Heather Hill, Washington Terrace. This is a question to you, Commissioner. Obviously, there's enough interest and effort being placed on this study. Would the Commission be willing to go ahead and start the initiative?
On the spot, Mr. Commissioner.
I came here not prepared to talk, to listen, and now, well, I'm just teasing. We always have to be prepared to answer questions, and I appreciate that. But I can't tell you the answer to that one particularly because I can't speak for the other commissioners. I do know that I'm open to hearing what the public has to say about it. The fact that you're here means that there's some desire to talk about this issue, and I'm certainly willing to hear those points of view. But really, until a couple of weeks ago, when I was made aware of this forum, I had heard nobody talk about this as an important item on the agenda, and so it's something that I would definitely need to learn a lot more about before I would be willing to put it on the ballot. But my job is to hear what you as constituents have to say and respond to that. And so I'm willing to look at it and study it and figure out what makes the most sense for our county. But I can't speak for the commission as a whole. That's why there's 3 of us. We do those things in public meetings that are posted and available for the public to attend.
Okay, Commissioner Bell, you have we're in the back of the room, by the way. You have a question?
Well, actually, I have a statement. So when you come up and Adam was talking about the cost, so I talked to that Mayor of Ogden and I got the information. So the Ogden City Council and the Ogden Mayor staff is $1.5 million a year. So if we were to duplicate it, and our commission staff with our staff people is about $770,000 a year. So it's almost double to have a council form of government because each staff are different. Salt Lake County is even different because they get a full-time employee. Every council member gets a full-time employee that does their research and does all their stuff, and then they show up at the meeting, just have to vote on something. So there are some of those things there. So the difference is about double is what I see.
All right, Commissioner Bell, thank you. Anyone from from up here want to address that? No. Oh, fantastic.
So maybe a point of clarification would be that the staff with the mayor's office and the staff with the council's office also includes people who staff the redevelopment agency. We have a lot of activity there. They also staff the municipal building authority. So there are 3 different entities that are staffed by the people who serve the council. We have a council executive director, a couple of policy analysts, a couple of support staff people, and somebody who deals with planning commission issues. And so that's the staff we have. We don't have individual staff members. So I don't know if you're really comparing apples to apples with that.
And just for those folks who don't know.
Oh, sorry. I'm Amy Wicks. I'm on the Ogden City Council.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman. You got a question? Okay.
My name is Jean Norman, and I'm brand new here, and I need a little explanation, and this kind of brings up the issue. I really don't know what the county and the city do differently here. I know in Las Vegas, I know in Chicago, a lot of other places, the county has less power or more power than the city. Can somebody just help me understand the difference in the power structure or the duties of each?
Well, we have a councilwoman behind you and a commissioner in front of you. So how about one of you take this on and the other can say where they're wrong? Or is there someone on the panel who feels like, Adam, do you feel like
The Olene Walker Institute is having...
Di, if you could use the mic.
Speak up. Tell her what you're going to be having starting in September. Someplace for you to go to where you can really learn a lot.
We're hosting with the Ogden City Government Citizens Academy, which I would love for everybody to attend and to enroll in through continuing education at Weber State. Thank you for the plug. So that's where we'll have elected officials, appointed officials, and other people to come and talk about what the city government does exactly. And so we hope that you'll enroll for that. Thank you. And we have literature out on our table in the front as well.
Now, I don't want to take too much time, dwelling on, an overview of what the county and city do, but does anyone feel like they have the Cliff Notes 30-second answer?
I can try. I would say this, it's not a lot different than it is in Las Vegas.
Especially in Las Vegas, has the entire Las Vegas Strip. It's the most powerful body in the state.
Yeah. And I think there are responsibilities that, I guess I would say this, county governments have responsibilities for things both inside and outside of city boundaries. But they're primarily responsible for things outside of city boundaries because cities have their own ordinance-making authority and they're a separate independent body. So I could give you a long dissertation on that, but I would probably bore people and get things wrong. So it's we have separate authority, but they do overlap in some ways.
I would just add to that by saying that they are quite different. Cities definitely have more responsibility to provide municipal services. So for instance, you very seldom see counties providing water and sewer and secondary water, those types of things. It's not a county responsibility, but we do have the responsibility. If you take a look at, I think a way to look at that is take a look at the other elected officials in the county that manage certain departments and areas. That'll give you a pretty good overview of what the county really does. Because you've got an assessor who is responsible to assess your property and then tax it, right? The assessor is not the person who spends that money, but he assesses the property. The cities generally spend the money. A lot of what the county collects. In fact, I think it's interesting when you get your property tax bill, I think most people assume that a lot of it goes to the county. If you look real close, very little of it goes to the county. It goes to the city, it goes to the school district, it goes to the mosquito abatement, it goes to the sewer district, it goes to all of those other taxing entities that the county is required to collect for. And so if you look at the county assessor, if you look at the county clerk and his responsibilities, clerk auditor and his responsibilities, if you look at the recorder surveyor, if you look at the treasurer, did I miss anybody, guys? Because I see them all sitting back there.
We're looking at them all.
If you look at the county sheriff, that gives you an idea of what counties do. And then I think I'll let somebody speak a little more to the city thing if you'd like, but they are generally much more municipal services oriented.
I would like to get to the next question or comment.
My question is for this young man in the blue. In your presentation, it showed what the process was to go through, to decide if we're going to have a study or not. And once the study has been done, I just need you to clarify if it comes up that we need to keep the same kind of system that we already have in place, does this still go on the ballot?
that, well, first of all, I like the, you calling me young. That was a great way to start off.
I should have been talking about karaoke, sorry.
So was the question for me or Carrie?
He's stumped.
My understanding is, and I'd have to check the state statute, is that it would still go on the ballot, but I would need to check that. So one way or another, whatever my understanding is, and this is the one question I can't answer with 100% certainty without checking the state law, but whatever the results that's presented by the study committee is would go on the ballot, but I'd need to check that.
Okay, we have another question over here, I saw. Okay.
I'm Steve Clark from Eden. For the last 10 years, I've had a lot of opportunity to work with each one of the county commissioners on planning issues primarily, especially related to the way we expect the Ogden Valley to grow and to develop. There are two major reasons that I think this discussion tonight is important. The first is that I have noticed on several occasions the scope of debate on issues has been limited. And as much as three county commissioners attempt to gather information, it's difficult to do that, and representation is an issue with three commissioners because there are just plain fewer ears to listen to all of the points of view and the way the issue should be represented and discussed. The second major issue is the measure of efficiency and effectiveness in managing the government itself. And as I've watched and worked with 2 or 3 of the county department heads over the 10 years, what I see is county heads that kind of duck for cover when new commissioners come in, hope that they get appointed to one that they can work with pretty well, and then endure 4 years or 8 years of service with that leader, and then wait to see who the next guy is that's coming in. And all the time, it's like the battleship commander just keeping the ship going straight through the water while the newly elected executive is flailing his arms saying, let's change course this way or that way. And budget discussions and management discussions seem to me, my perspective is that they are limited in their effectiveness, which would lead me to say we ought to really investigate the council manager approach much more carefully, because I don't want to be part of a company that has 3 CEOs on a $100 million budget if I don't have to.
Okay, and thank you for your point, because it kind of gets to something we haven't really addressed so far, which is so far we've been talking about, it almost feels like a solution in search of a problem, because we haven't talked about why talk about a change. And so thank you for bringing up a critique you have of the county system. And so we'll put it to the panel. Does a commission system, is it a 3-person system, does that limit debate too much? You get 3 people who know each other well, and eventually they just go, and they decide. Does that happen?
Why is everyone looking at me? I think there's certainly the possibility of that, but I maintain that is a possibility in any size. You have a city council or a county council, they can know each other every bit as well as a 3-member commission, and to me it doesn't seem like the size makes that much of a difference. My thought is that there needs to be vigorous debate, no matter whether you're in a city or a county or what form those take. We need to have vigorous debate, and sometimes it's ironic that exactly that vigorous debate is what upsets or alienates a particular group or individual, and then people think that the body isn't functioning appropriately, when again, that's exactly what the body was intended to do, was to have that vigorous and open debate. So whatever we do, we ought to insist that we have that type of debate among our officials.
Leah, you picked up a mic, or Di, you want to go?
Yeah,
Leah,
so
let's start with you.
But I think the other thing that you brought up as well is the 3 CFOs of a company or 3 CEOs of a company. There's a reason why the Founding Fathers picked one president, okay? Because you want to have a single unitary executive making those decisions and accountability on that one person, that you don't want executive authority dispersed. I think I respect the Founding Fathers. So I think there's something to that, right? When you separate the executive out, no matter what it costs us, you get a little bit more accountability, a little bit more direction in the handling of where the county is going to go.
And when you consider the numbers, whether it's 3, 5, or 7, the larger the group, the broader perspectives you're going to have brought to any discussion. So I would support something that is larger, definitely. There's also something we haven't talked about, and it's one part of the old position statement that the League of Women Voters had, and that was that we thought that there should be districts that the commissioners or the council members are voted from. So there would be more representation. So Eden wouldn't be up there by itself with nobody representing them, or everybody, all 3 commissioners wouldn't be from South Ogden and North Ogden and the rural part of the county, so you're really different, would be left out in the code. So I think that it's better to have more because of the different perspectives that are brought to the table. And I also think that we ought to have our commissioners or council members voted in according to districts.
Adam, you had picked up your mic and then put it back.
I have a problem with this concept that more people is going to yield better results. I just don't buy that. I think you're going to get broader discussion, but I would suggest that in a commission or a council forum, an awful lot of what the discussion, what leads the discussion is people from the community participating. And the fact that 3 people are making decisions in the end, I don't think is an indicator that those are the only 3 people whose voice is being heard. So by that theory, let's have 75 people, and we can have them meet part of the year, and they can make decisions and have input from people, and then we can see what you get from the county. I think the concept is it's good to have dialogue, and more voices are useful to that dialogue, but they aren't necessary to make certain that you come up with a solution that works for the community. You're always going to have disagreements. You're going to have folks who are going to end up on one side or the other.
Okay.
Is this on? Yeah. Dan Schroeder, I live in Ogden. One of my concerns is that at the moment, if I'm not mistaken, we have no commissioner who represents Ogden City. And historically, in the time I've lived here, we've had relatively few commissioners who have represented Ogden City, even though Ogden City, I think, is still about 40% of about a third of the population. But my question is, how much latitude does state law give us regarding what Di was talking about? Can we have a 27-member commission, all of whom are elected at large? So how much latitude is there about the size, whether it's a commission or a council, and how much latitude is there about how many are elected at large and how many are elected by district?
I think that might be Duncan's question. Is that one that you feel comfortable with, or?
My understanding is that the numbers are 3, 5, 7, or 9. I mean, so you've got limited options as far as the total number.
And does that include commission or council?
Right, in either case, whether it's a commission or council, as far as the number of commissioners or council members. And the statute, like I say, has changed a little bit over the last few years. My understanding is, without having checked that specifically before coming tonight, that the district option is still available. So they could all be at large, or some can be elected by districts. And you can do a combination thereof sometimes, because obviously if you had 7 members, you could have 6 one-member districts and 1 at-large, or 3 two-member districts and 1 at-large, similar to cities. Some cities do the same thing. So you do have those options, I believe, still in the state law.
I just want to clarify so everyone in the room understands, and I do. When you say the Ogden is not represented, does that mean that just no one resides in Ogden, or that that Ogden does not have
I said
a council
again,
person?
none of the 3 current commissioners reside in Ogden.
Okay, thank you. You had a question, ma'am.
Janet Shipton, I reside in Ogden, but I've lived 4 years in Roy, and none of them are very long. But 40 years ago in Iowa, the exact situation we're discussing, the same kind of reasons about 3, or whether there should be more. I'm not sure how the decision was made, but it was simply on the ballot, we voted, and implementing to go from 3 to 5. What was on the ballot was that the 2 would run and be elected for a 2-year term, and the 4 would run as they always, 3 would run as they always had for 4 years. And then the new T would not be re-elected at the same time as the other 3. So not everybody would go off at once. So you have a form of continuity. And the vote was very positive, and we went from 3 to 5. I ran for one of the 2 ones. And it was interesting because friends of mine voted for me who voted for the 4-year-old 4 ones, which is a different party. But I was a different person. They knew me. Rural people knew me because of 4-H and because I'm going too long. But that's how we implemented them, the 3 to the 5. And there wasn't any big study or anything. It was just a general view that the problems of 3, if one's sick, you've only got 2, and you no longer got a commission if you've only got 2 people. And that happens, and it's a problem. You get much more personal. And the other on the representation, that I'm not sure that it's a good idea to divide it up into little sections, but I think it's up to the voters to see that the people who stand for run represent enough different areas, and let the people decide that.
Thank you so much. A point about staggering elections. How does it work right now with the commission? Do you have staggered elections so you don't have all new commissioners at once?
There we go. We have 2, they're 4-year terms. All terms are 4-year terms. We have 2 commissioners on one cycle, 1 on the off cycle. So,
And it would be possible to do that if the system changed as well, to stagger terms. Okay, back here. Oh, okay, we'll get to you, Spencer. We have one person with the mic over here.
Hi, I'm Corey Howerson, and I'm a 4th generation plumber, contractor. I'm a private contractor myself. When my family first got into the plumbing business, it was called Van den Bosch and Halverson. And the Van den Bosches went into education. Halverson stayed in the plumbing business. I do know this, that Ogden, Utah was one of the richest cities in the West at the turn of the century in the 1800s. I believe in trickle-up government. I think change happens at the local level, and I've worked for a lot of years for Bell Photography and for Matthew Bell. And I learned a lot when I worked in the schools. I was wondering, this might be just a question for, I forget your name in the black and white, but can we, as a county, combine some of our school districts so more of the dollars go to the child? I know in Clark County that they have as many students as the whole state of Utah, and they have 1 superintendent. Only $1 in $4 makes it to the student here in Utah.
So your question is a good question. I was an educator, but I'm afraid I'm not going to get into that tonight because it's not related right now, but I can talk to you about it afterwards.
Good question, but a different government structure for school boards than county commission. Okay, Spencer, here you go.
Hi, thanks. Any meeting that has the words 4-H uttered in, I think, are positive. Don't you agree, Commissioner Gibson? Yeah. So we've had that, so I don't need to bring it up. But we focused a lot tonight on the legislative side of this. Oh, Spencer Stokes lived in Ogden City. So, but what I'd like to hear more about is the executive side of it, where, having been there, that was always a constant battle when you had the legislative branch being the executive branch. You can imagine if the 75 House members in the state legislature were also the executive, or the 435 House members on the federal level were also the executive. So some of the issues that arise when you have 3 members that all share the duties of the executive branch, because I think we've covered adequately the legislative side of it, and we determined that yes, you're always going to have disagreements, but when it comes to the executive side, what are the pluses and minuses there?
Who wants to take that one on?
I don't think there's anybody who knows the answer to that question any better than the guy that asked it. I mean, frankly, Mr. Stokes was a commissioner. What was the years, Mr. Stokes?
92 to 96, Mr. Gibson.
And when was the last study?
94 was the last vote.
And there was a study before that. I mean, I'm just assuming that there was some discussion during your time in office. Maybe you could give us some, I mean, your opinion, because I think it's as valuable. I think your experience is valuable to me. Yeah, I mean, tell us what you think.
I wasn't around for the, I had left prior to it being on the ballot. I was involved with the Salt Lake County when they changed that form of government. But the issue becomes for me, or at least what I saw there, and you can share your own experiences, that the management of the county was rarely talked about during the county commission meetings. It wasn't something that was subject to the public input. I mean, the day-to-day management. And so what you were left with was, I had departments that I supervised, but my supervision was no better than the supervision of the other 2 county commissioners. So if you had a county commissioner who disagreed with you, they could just simply go to that department head and say, hey, I don't think the way Commissioner Stokes is telling you to do this is the right way to do it. And then you have a department director who's very much in a turbulent time, who's trying to figure out which commissioner he's supposed to listen to. And I think that becomes for me, I think the bigger challenge with the county council or the county commission form of government is wearing both the executive hat and the legislative hat. It's fine to have 3, 5, 7, 9 people talking about legislative issues where you have healthy debate and disagreement. It's the execution of that becomes, I think, the bigger problem. And so for that, I really would welcome a study to see what would happen, how that pans out with the executive side, because I look at all of the examples of, and I don't really know how we got here. I mean, we had the founders that came up with this great concept of one executive and a legislative body. I don't know what went on when the state decided in the Constitution that we thought it was a good idea to have 3 CEOs of a corporation versus 1. So
I have to follow up before you go sit down. I think I heard you say in there, a little more diplomatically, that as a county commissioner, you would say one thing, you'd all make a decision, but then commissioners would undercut each other as executives.
Well, right, but those decisions, the day-to-day management, correct, the day-to-day management of the county is not something that comes to a county commission meeting. I mean, you don't come to the county commission meeting and say, I really think the department head out of the arena is crappy. That's not being discussed in a county commission meeting. The hiring and firing happens on the executive side of this. And so I can recite plenty of examples of getting phone calls from department heads who had been fired by one of the county commissioners, and having the department head call you and say, hey, I just had Commissioner so-and-so walk into the office and fire me. Am I really fired? Well, why don't you stay in your desk and I'll go see. And then you have to go and find the other county. It's really a terrible way to run a business. You can only imagine if IBM or Adobe or Microsoft ran it with 3 executives. So I really would like to I'd like to figure out how we got to that point,
Commissioner Gibson, you're the one who asked the question.
Yeah, so let me just say to the statement that it wouldn't that those types of things, executive things, wouldn't be discussed. I would just say they're never going to be discussed with the mayor, because the mayor has that authority all in one person. So there's the downside to that side, or to that argument, because instead of 3 people who have that responsibility together, you know, I understand that sometimes in a corporation, you probably want one person making decisions. We better think for sure that that's what we want in county government, because all that would be done under the direction of one person. It does give finality to those issues, right, if there's one person, but it does take away a little bit. I mean, we've talked a little bit about, I've heard the word checks and balances, and the fact of the matter is, when you have 3 people, and let me just say quickly that the way that has been handled in practice as far as those management responsibilities, and Mr. Stokes understands this because it's been this way, I think, for a long time, is that their executive responsibilities are split up into portfolios where certain commissioners are the lead over a certain area, a certain department, but by and large, in the end, a department head works for the commission, and it takes a majority of that commission to fire a department head. And so that definitely has to happen, but that having more than one person, in my mind, actually adds some protection as well to make sure that there are some checks in place.
Okay, we have a question back here. Adam, did you have a quick point to make? Or?
He's the one I want to hear from, because he has experience across the state.
Nobody ever says that.
I mean, you're the person who knows across the state. You have experience with county commissions across the state. So what is your opinion about this question?
My opinion is that I would not.
Oh, I'm Carol Jennings, and I live in Ogden.
My opinion is that I would not contradict either Carrie or Spencer, so that's pretty much clear. And I would say, but I will say a couple of things. I certainly don't know how we got to this situation either, as far as commission being the form that took, or first took root really in Utah. But I think that the response I would give is this. Whatever you try to do, I think the fundamental question is, how do you think you're best going to organize those functions? How effective do you want to be in your executive function? How much control do you want from the legislative body over what the executive does? Those questions have to be asked, because it's going to define what you do. I can tell you, if you've got a county manager who's responsible for all departments in a county government and reports to the county council, that county manager is serving at the will of the county council. So are they actually independent? Are they actually going to be able to be independent, or are they going to be subject to those sort of differing opinions of council members?
I'm sorry, Adam, I was just going to say your questioner has a point she wants to make real quickly.
Of all the people in this room, you are the person who sees experiences across the state, and I'm asking you for that. Is there an executive, single person that's done an excellent job, or someone who's really thrown everything out the window? A specific example of possibly where it worked, or one where it didn't work.
Shortened to that is, come on, Adam, take a stand.
Give me the benefit of your experience.
I appreciate that question, but the problem I'm having is there is no single answer to that. Do you want more efficiency in the organization of your government, and you want one person to be able to make decisions, or 2 people to be able to make decisions on the legislative and the executive side? Absolutely, then a commission's going to work. Do you want broad discussion and dialogue, but you want all the executive authority placed somewhere else so that they have responsibility for running the government, and then you have a body that makes decisions on legislative function? Then you want a council with a separately elected county mayor. There is no definite answer to that. I can tell you from my experience that the county commission form works very well if you're trying to focus on getting the work of county government done, because there's a smaller body that's making decisions. But I think one of the reasons you're here, and one of the reasons that some counties, probably Salt Lake County and Spencer could say that, went to or consider going to a different body for the legislative side, is because they have a broader population, they have a greater range of opinion, and they have a greater range of communities than we did in 1880. And I think that's the challenge you're all facing. My only point really is, don't grab onto one idea as the solution to what bothers you, because you're going to get stuck with something coming back to bite you, whether it's more cost because you've got more staff you have to hire, or decision-making consolidated in one body. It really does depend on what your community needs, and I think that's the challenge. I think the question you're all facing is, do we want to look into this, and is there enough interest here? Is there enough of a problem here that we think that we should evaluate changing the form of government? It's not a simple thing to do, and it is not a panacea to go one direction or the other. So I don't have a solid answer for you. It really depends on what you need in your community. And
this has been a fantastic discussion. We don't want to go over an hour and a half. I do see a person back there who hasn't had a chance to say something, who's been waiting. So we'll hear from you as a final question. We'll close things off.
In answer to Commissioner Gibson, it's the Democrats that are making the wrongs. As a Republican, you probably haven't heard that. But sorry, I won't make any more digs than that. I'm a Weber County resident for the past 20 years. I live in West Haven. Prior to that, I was a Cache County resident who lived in Cache County, actively involved in gathering the signatures to put the question before the people. The people chose to spread the representation out. That's what we wanted, was representation rather than executive decisions, which we did not like. I was chosen by the Southwest group of people to run for office, representing the southwest portion of Cache County. If you know anything about Cache County, that would include Hiram, Wellsville, Mendon, and Petersburg. I would have been responsible to 3 city councils in that area. I was a Mendon City Councilman at the time. Now, of course, being a Democrat, I wasn't elected, but that's beside the point. We fielded a Democratic candidate for each of those positions, though none were elected. Now, we have a functioning county council 90 miles to the north. I would like to hear how well they function. In the beginning, all of those people, including the executive, were elected by the people. There was a representative from Logan City, being the largest city in the group.
Okay, so the question is, how well does that function?
Yes, I would like to hear from somebody that is actively working in a county council form that would really help us as a body of citizens trying to make this decision. Now, I am in favor already of putting this on the ballot once again before the people of the county and having it voted on. If it doesn't succeed, then they go with the people we've got. But I would really like to hear from functioning county council people. Now, I can't compare the size of Cache County to Weber County, and I'm sure since '87 when I ran for election it has changed a lot. But all of those people were part-time, they were paid a stipend that included mileage and some sitting and meeting time.
Well, that is
final decisions were made by the executive with input from the council.
That is a really good question. We don't have anybody up here who has served on the county council. Is there anyone who feels like they're qualified to answer how that functions? But it's a good question for people to ask and get answered up here. And really impressive, as we've heard questions from so many people, how involved and engaged you are, how many people have run for office and held office, like in Mendon, in Iowa. It's really, it's what a pleasure and what a wonderful conversation. Does anybody on our panel have anything they've just been aching to say as this conversation has gone on before we close things off?
Max, let me just put in one plug. There's a pretty good little TV show that I think does a pretty good job of educating folks on the on some of the things that counties do and the responsibilities of counties. If you get a chance to watch it, it's called The County Seat. It's all online. You can watch it online if you'd like. I think it's the County Seat TV.tv or something. Anyway, they had an interesting little debate about this several months ago, and you should be able to go back into the archives and see that debate. There was, one of the participants in that debate was the Cache County executive, so that might answer a few of your questions. It seems like he thought that it was a pretty good system in Cache Valley. I'll say that from his statement. One of them was a Grand County commissioner. I'm guessing, is that a commission, expanded commission?